This video will, at points, almost seem like a lucid dream. A game that, if you're not aware of it, will baffle you completely. And I suspect that some will still have the reaction, even as Takeshi's Challenge has become gradually more famous as one weird trip of a game. Hell, you can even play it in English now, allowing people from outside of Japan to truly see just what it's capable of. When Japanese magazines make their list of the top shit games, or kusoges of all time, this is usually at or near the top. Hell, it's one of the most well-known Famicom games, and one of the most infamous. Takeshi's Challenge is something else. And of course it's a licensed game. Not just based on, but made with close input from, well, something of a man. I have always wanted to cover Takeshi's Challenge, of that there is no doubt, but oh boy is it going to be a difficult one. And that's just because of the freaking game. Anyway, in order to actually try and understand Takeshi's Challenge, you need to start with the man himself. The Takeshi of the title is, of course, Takeshi Kitano, also known as Beat Takeshi. In the West you may well know him for various things. He's the titular star of the almighty Takeshi's Castle, Almost Extreme Elimination Challenge if you're American, a show filled with physical tests and comedic serious injuries as 100 contestants aim to defeat Count Takeshi and his evil army. If not that, you probably know him from films. He's had quite famous roles, including simply Kitano in Battle Royale, and hell, there's way more to cover here, but it needs to wait a little. He was also in Johnny Mnemonic, believe it or not, and he'll be in that new Ghost in the Shell film that's on the way. In Japan, he's famous for other reasons. Not only has he been a star since the 70s, he's been one of Japan's biggest comedic stars for the past 40 years. Kitano got his start as part of a manzai duo with his friend Beat Takeshi. They were known as 2-Beat, and that's where the Beat Takeshi name comes from. Manzai duos were known largely for insulting each other in rapid-fire style, and consisted of a straight man and a funny man. You know, like Morecambe and Wise, only with sillier costumes. 2-Beat were famous for being quite savage and sarcastic even for groups of the day, an act where nothing was above being insulted. Kitano went out on his own at the start of the 80s, becoming and remaining a very popular comedian on Japanese TV, and continuing on in much the same vein. The original Takeshi's Castle is just one of many very popular shows starring Takeshi Kitano, and it's probably the best one. I mean, the majority of Takeshi's TV shows are total trash television, Japanese light entertainment that's kind of the equivalent of a Noel Edmonds or what have you. Only imagine if Noel Edmonds did Mr. Blobby and all that, while also being one of the most respected film directors on the entire planet. It is hard to equate all of this good-natured, kooky fun with the other side of Takeshi, the one he's undoubtedly more well known for in the West: his films. Takeshi Kitano fell into directing films almost by accident with 1989's Violent Cop. A scheduling conflict meant that long-time Yakuza film director Kinji Fukasaku, who would later direct Takeshi in Battle Royale, had to leave the project, and Kitano ended up in the chair instead. It was a generic Yakuza film at first, but Kitano changed just about everything. There is no comedy here. Violent Cop is an utterly fatalistic film, almost a Japanese Dirty Harry but with an even grimmer ending. Kitano continued to make films in the same vein, stories based on Yakuza, apparently inspired in many ways by his experiences in Yakuza 1 Manzai clubs and, well, just meeting lots of Yakuza as you do, but told with a certain knack that separated it from many other Yakuza films. And as it turned out, he was kind of a natural. In Japan, where he's obviously famous for different reasons, people did not know how to take to these films. They were trained to laugh at Kitano's very appearance, after all. But we loved these films in the West. 1993's Sonatine saw him win more acclaim in the West and get name-dropped by Quentin Tarantino, and we continue to love him today for films like Zatoichi and Outrage. He has also at times produced some quieter, moodier pieces, films like Kikujiro or A Scene at the Sea, plus the odd comedy like Kids Return that, we don't really tend to get quite as much. We like the more actiony stuff. But then there is the film where it all came together, 1997's Hanabi, or Fireworks. Another Yakuza piece, but filled with personal touches and a lyricism entirely of his own, one of the most celebrated and famous films in Asian cinema. If you're Western anyway, although it was the film that finally made the Japanese public accept Takeshi as a serious film director, purely because it was that damn good. And it's all from the same person who does things like this and continues to do so to this day. Like I said, it can be tricky to match the two. Dry and sarcastic sometimes, utterly zany others, mean-spirited often, an artist and court jester. He's Takeshi Kitano. And in 1986, he decided to try his hand at a video game. The story goes that Taito had a license to make a game based around Takeshi Kitano, and that once Takeshi got wind of it, he decided to become heavily involved in the production process. In doing so, he became one of, if not the first ever celebrity to be heavily involved with the design of their own video game. Takeshi's role could be described, in a way, as a level designer, and he worked fast, apparently designing just about the whole game over the course of one night in a bar while he was getting smashed into oblivion on sake, and a couple of people from Taito were recording everything that he came up with. Leaving aside ideas that the Famicom wasn't capable of realising, or ideas that were simply not suitable for the system or indeed anyone, everything in Takeshi's challenge comes from the mind of Takeshi Kitano. He didn't want a traditional game, he wanted something thoroughly different. And, well, that's what he got. Perhaps the first question is why? Why would Taito go into such a direction? These are the folks who helped to make video games what they were. You'd have thought they would be more traditionalist. But as I said, Takeshi was pretty much the first celebrity to ever get so involved with a video game, and he was a huge star. The presence of Takeshi Kitano was virtually guaranteed to make the game a big seller no matter what was on the cartridge, and so, heck, why not run with it? It's odd, but the one single game that I frequently see Takeshi's challenge compared to is the also quite odd Frankie Goes to Hollywood on the C64. Although make no mistake, Frankie is a much, much better game. There is, however, one little problem right off the bat. Takeshi Kitano has an outspoken hatred for almost everything electronic, including video games. He hates mobile phones, social media, email, computers in general, and pretty much anything that interferes with traditional Japanese values. Basically, he's a grumpy old man and has always been a grumpy old man. There are few people who you would think less suitable to design in a video game than Takeshi freaking Kitano. Which in many ways is why the game itself is so interesting. Beyond that, there's not much to speculate on. The actual process of development is shrouded in mystery, although it didn't last long. According to the very first episode of Game Center CX, virtually no one who was working at Taito when that was filmed in 2003 worked on Takeshi's challenge. Perhaps not surprising, seeing as the team would have only consisted of a few people, and in any case no one has ever been credited with the creation of the game aside from Takeshi himself. Even the person who wrote the strategy guide that a lot of people ended up complaining about is apparently in the fricking ground. There are many things about the game that are shrouded in mystique and forever will be. Maybe even that whole story about Kitano designing the game while pissed of an evening is just the stuff of legend, something to add to it. All these things do certainly help to make the game more enticing, but like I said, it was a sure thing. It's got Takeshi Kitano's name on it, therefore it's going to be a hit. However, one thing could have damaged the game's steady approach to becoming a smash. In December of 1986, mere days before the release of the game, Takeshi Kitano was caught in a scandal. Pissed off that a gossip mag had accused him of an extramarital affair, he went in their office one day and basically started punching people. Such incidents can be quite damaging indeed in Japan. However, the upshot of it all was that Takeshi was banned from appearing on TV for a few months, and that was about it. Takeshi's challenge was still released as planned. I'm now going to obviously put off playing the thing for a bit longer by saying that if you've ever seen an episode of Takeshi's Castle or MXC where the Count is wearing a big papier-mâché head, that's from the time when Kitano was banned. It's not him under it. and that's about when Takeshi's Challenge was released. Isn't that interesting? Okay, I can put it off no longer. Here goes. Takeshi's Challenge is best described as a side-scrolling series of vignettes where you play a nameless and very upbeat salaryman who has decided, at last, to change his life. You do this by making a whole load of frankly baffling decisions. There is no official NES or Famicom game that offers anything even remotely like what Takeshi's Challenge brings to the table, and the only real way to show that is to go through, well, as much of the game as one can stand. And does that music loop annoy you yet? Good, you'll be hearing this loop a lot, and it's almost designed to piss you off and remain in your head forever. I should note that the game can be played in English thanks to an excellent translation by KinMike available at womhacking.net. It's essential if you want to try the game, as unless you know Japanese the game will be virtually impossible to complete. And frankly it's a lot more fun this way too. Anyway, once you're in the game, oh, actually, forget about the game. Takeshi's Challenge can kill you on the frickin' password screen if you happen to get the code wrong. You can even softlock the game on the password screen, forcing a reset. That's the level we're at here. Anyway, once you're actually in the game, you have several things to do, they must be done in a very specific order, and they defy all kinds of logic. You get a bonus from your boss, which if you take straight away won't give you enough money to buy all the things you need. So yeah, don't do that. How easy is it to screw yourself over in the game, and how unforgiving can it be? Well, let me put it this way. At one point, you need to get a map from an old man. Once the secrets of the map have been revealed, you must punch that old man to death. If you don't do this, well, you go through the entirety of the rest of the game, which by the way is one of the hardest known to man, and on the very last screen of the game, you meet the old man again. He completed the game before you did. Game over. That's the level we're truly at. Takeshi's Challenge's leaps of logic are so ridiculous, and difficulty so legendary, that there's more myths associated with this game than there are with Chuck frickin' Norris. They say that you have to sing into a microphone for an hour, or hit a boss 40,000 times, or literally not touch the game for 4 hours in order to progress at one point. None of these are wholly true, although they're not far off. There is a karaoke bit using the mic on the Famicom's second controller, although it lasts for 3 songs, if you're good anyway. If you punch the air 20,000 times, no more, no less, on the title screen, you'll warp to the game's ending. And the do nothing part can actually last for as little as 5 minutes, if you get the timing right. Or it can last up to an hour. So yeah, that all sounds reasonable, doesn't it? The truth is so much weirder, and there is so much more. So we're apparently in Tokyo, we're a salaryman, and we hate our job. It's time to move on. As a family man, the responsible thing to do is clearly the following. Go to the bank and withdraw all our savings, and learn how to play a shamisen. That seems reasonable enough, doesn't it? We use our newly found shamisen plucking skills to go to the bar and get obliterated on cheap booze. After we pass out, we wake up in our home. Obviously our wife is not happy and wants to murder our hero, but we can stop that by getting a divorce. Unfortunately this means that we have to pay the wife a whole bunch of money, or punch her, and your kids. Okay, you actually have to pay her the money, but again, that's the level we're at. I would like to remind you that this game is officially licensed by Nintendo. The guidelines on what could and couldn't be included in a Nintendo game were obviously a little bit more lax in Japan. Only after doing this do we collect all of the cash from the boss and quit our job, obviously making sure that we've punched him into his desk too. Hell, just when you're walking around there's lots of opportunities for punching people. You can punch anyone. And of course some people will want to punch you. Bad boy types, the police, pirates and so forth. You get 4 hearts and no lives. Once they're gone, the game's over. But there is an easy cheat code to replenish them. Press the A and B buttons together 3 times after you die, and you'll be back to normal. Get used to doing this. And this is just the first smidgen of the game. Barely any time's gone by, and already you've had to be a complete drunken bastard. Even getting to this point requires a certain mindset. For everyone else, it's a case of aimlessly wandering around these streets, which can be sort of funny. I mean, everyone hates you. You're a creep. Everything you do is morally reprehensible. You can even buy porn in this game if you want to. You can pay 10,000 yen for a glass of whiskey. Or you can go to a pachinko parlour, gamble a load of balls away, then shout and curse into the second controller mic for a few minutes until a bunch of people come in to throw you out and you punch them to death. Oh, wait a minute. You have to do that in order to progress. Because it's Takeshi's challenge. The same sort of people also come in to stop you from singing any more awful karaoke, after which you get the map and the shenanigans I previously mentioned happen. Don't forget to punch an old man to death. Anyway, said map is a treasure map telling of untold riches that lie in the South Pacific. You have to do all of these things and more besides to get there. There's a chance you might be questioning the game's logic at this point, just a little chance. I mean, why do I have to do all of these things? Why, for example, do I have to pay my wife all that money? Can't I just punch her instead? Well, if you don't pay that money, then this happens. Presumably the family of your wife took revenge by putting a bomb on that plane. In case you were wondering, Takeshi Kitano has been married to his wife Mikiko for 38 years, so I don't know where it all comes from. Anyway, if you followed the game's logic and sense of justice to the letter, you'll make it to the South Pacific. I can barely speak of the fun that follows, such as the almighty hand gliding section. Now this is how the mind of someone who doesn't play games designing a game works. You have a hand glider, right? And you're flying it. Now obviously, because it's a glide, you're actually gliding it, so once you go down, you can't go back up again. You've got to hit gusts of wind to do that even a little bit, all the while still avoiding enemies that'll kill you in one shot. The result is the most ruthlessly, sensibly logical section of the game, and also its hardest. 90% of the actual difficulty in Takeshi's challenge comes from this single section, which is one of the hardest things you'll find on the Famicom. The game designer's thing to do would be, of course, to just not have a hand glider at all. Make it a freaking biplane or something that can actually be controlled. But Takeshi insisted on a hand glider, so that's what you get. And may God have mercy upon you. Even more cruelly, there are other vehicles you can use in this section, like a Cessna for example. Great! Unfortunately it can't actually land on the island, so it's just a delayed game over. Only the hand glider works. I've never beaten the hand glider section. I barely need to tell you that failing it means going all the way back to the beginning of the game. But wait a minute, what about that password system though? Well, that's all good. However, to get a password you actually have to physically end a game from the items menu. What, you thought you'd get one after a game over? No. I can show you the final treasure room section where you have to find specific places to crouch in order to move on, but that's about it. This, however, is the infamous ending. A small picture of Takeshi's face congratulating you on beating the game. And if you leave it for 5 minutes, he also says this: "Don't take things so seriously." The final fatal punchline. So what even is this Finn? Takeshi's challenge is basically a comedy game. An utterly perverse comedy game made by someone who truly hates video games. Now you might say over the course of a review of something or other that, oh, it's clear that designer of shitty game here hates video games, just to be dramatic, but no. Takeshi Kitano's hatred of video games is a matter of public record. And the humour is Takeshi's. Mean-spirited, utterly vulgar, and a little absurd. And it has to be said, at times, quite funny. It's especially funny to use the mic just about everywhere, because the people do react to it. It is kind of interesting, even though the game openly takes the piss out of people who look for secrets in games. It features a shit ton of secrets. Even the map revealing section has tons, if you're willing to wait several hours for like a test screen or something. The best way to appreciate Takeshi's challenge is almost from a distance, as something ludicrously absurd to be experienced, but hell, not a game to be beaten. down that pathway lies madness. I'd rather just go around Tokyo, get shit-faced and lose all my money at pachinko, all the while listening to that bloody loop, something that I am guaranteed never to get out of my head as long as I live. Do you want to know why the game features a section where you'll very likely be forced to do nothing for an hour? Because Takeshi Kitano wanted to encourage the player to go outside and do something else. These days games use augmented reality and cute little creatures to do that. In 1986, Kitano told you to put the controller down or face the fatal consequences. And so it was written, so it shall be done. The reception for Takeshi's challenge isn't that well recorded, but it is obvious. Again, no matter how it's reviewed, it was going to sell purely based on Kitano's name. And so it did, around about 800,000 copies if the figures are correct. Apparently tip magazines and strategy guide makers were kinda busy for a few months afterwards. The game is nowadays regarded, in Japanese press, as one of the most infamous kusoges or shit games to ever come out, which says a lot. There are games for the Famicom that make even the worst of LJN look like Castlevania by comparison. Consider the likes of Super Monkey Daiboken or Lost World of Jenny or Hoshi wa Mirahito. These games, perhaps the very worst known to man, are the company that Takeshi's challenge keeps. Mind you, the game's not all that hard to find if you want a copy, nor is it particularly expensive. It still has a certain reputation and it is an interesting cultural artifact for one of Japan's most famous comedians. Takeshi's challenge wasn't Kitano's only dalliance with video games. There were two others, although thankfully he didn't design them. Takeshi no Sengoku Funji is a board game of sorts, based on Takeshi's Castle. And Family Trainer Totsugeki Fun Takeshi Shiro is a power pad game, also based on Takeshi's Castle. The first game isn't one you're likely to get much out of unless you speak Japanese, and as far as I know it is untranslated. And the second is, much like all the other Family Trainer games but with a different skin. You're gonna be running, jumping and shit. He is also a part of the cast for the latest instalment in Sega's Yakuza series, his first involvement in any game for nearly 30 years. Perhaps another way to look at Takeshi's challenge is to look at where it came in his career. It could have perhaps only happened right at that point, just before he started making all those movies. There was always a sort of frustrated artist side to Kitano, something which does come out here. It's not hard to see the salaryman as Takeshi himself as he becomes ever more mainstream, longing for the days when his act was actually seen as controversial, wanting to explore new directions. The frustration was exacerbated over the years by his Yakuza films not being taken seriously at all by Japanese audiences, which gave Takeshi a very dark side. He drank heavily and often spoke of dying young, not to mention that almost all of his films involved death in a big way. As well as references to his other career, Sonatine actually features direct callbacks to frickin' Takeshi's Castle. This is a film where, even after the protagonist seemingly ties up every single loose end in traditional movie fashion, he still takes his own life. That's kind of where Takeshi's mind was at, and had been for years. A motorcycle accident in 1994 where he almost lost his life changed a lot of things, calmed him down, and ultimately resulted in Hanabi, which put almost all of the demons to rest at once. As far as Takeshi's challenge goes though, it is an odd game, a frustrating game, a flat out terrible game, but it could have only come from the mind of a rather interesting and truly talented person. But certainly one with a lot of messed up ideas in any case. Thanks once again for watching this video on the almighty Takeshi's challenge. If you liked the video then please do like it, and please consider subscribing. You could also follow me on all my social media, my Facebook and my Twitter, as well as supporting me on Patreon. Okay, now that the video's over, it's time for the music to begin. Jason Leach, Martin Pataki, Taylor Almond, Mark Johnston, Twisted Scroat, Grant Butler, V. Shardy, Ian Roberts, Dragon Sexmaster, Joel Hartman, Phil Taprog, Ben Coker, Jamie Hampshire, Tiago Pereira dos Santos Silva, Andre Russell, Leon Norris, Grayson Blackpool, Dave Parkinson, Olaf Albin. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much to all of those for their awesome support, and also thanks to these people: Tim Lintz, Robert Kelly, Jamie Davenport, Johan Eriksson, Stephen Hornsby, Jan Best, Robin Banks, Dan Roscoe, Terry Anderson, Francisco Pimenta, Kev Gilmore, Alexander Green, Thomas Daniels, Greg Olson, Christian Earnshaw, Stuart Ashen, Lee Harris, James Idd, Mike Siegler, Ed Reader, Russell Hugo, Ken Barraclough, Mark Johnson, Gerard Morris, Matt Lee, Paolo Leary, Graham Kamak, Scott Mitten, Nicole Ketchum, Mark Brooks, Ninth Demon, Peter Sidorn, Ludwig Holmstrom, John Ezell, Kit Leary, Elle O'Brien, and Novel. Thank you all for your fantastic support, as well as all the other patrons. I love you all. Next time we will have the prologue to another documentary about another British software company of legend that's long been requested. But until then, as usual, wherever you are, whoever you be, have a good one, take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.